Ancestry tests have become the modern-day pilgrimage. With just a vial of spit, we can now trace our roots across continents, uncovering fragments of our heritage buried in the bloodline. It's a revolution in identity, and for many, a moment of profound discovery. But what if your bloodline is more than just biology? What if it carries something deeper, something sacred? What if it holds the very essence of your ancestors, echoing their memories, their traumas, their triumphs? Science has taught us that DNA is a blueprint for our physical form, our height, our eye color, our susceptibility to disease. But African traditions have long understood that blood is more than just cells and genes. It is a spiritual archive. It's not just the body's inheritance, but a vessel for the soul, a conduit for memory, and a living connection to the divine. While science now begins to explore how trauma and behavior can pass from generation to generation through DNA, African spirituality has always held that blood does more than carry information, it carries spirit. As we dive deeper into the conversation about ancestry, we must ask, can blood remember? Can the stories of our ancestors, their wisdom, their pain, their power, be carried through the generations, not just in the mind, but in the very cells that form us? This question isn't just about genetics. It's about the intersection of science and spirit, where modern biology meets ancient African wisdom. The bloodline isn't just a biological trace, it is a living, breathing record of who we are and who we've always been. In many African cosmologies, blood is seen as far more than just a biological substance. It is considered sacred, an essential medium that carries not only the physical traits of one's ancestors, but the spiritual essence as well. In these traditions, blood is the thread connecting the living to the dead, the visible to the invisible. It is viewed as the carrier of ancestral power, a force that flows through generations and serves as the very lifeblood of existence. From the moment of birth, every individual is intimately connected to the spiritual legacy of their forebears. The living are not separated from the dead by a chasm, but united through this sacred flow, continuously shaped by the bloodline's cosmic energy. In the Yoruba tradition of Ifa, this concept is woven into the very fabric of their spiritual system. Ifa holds that the spirit of an individual is deeply intertwined with their ancestors, whose wisdom and power reside within the bloodline. Every initiation into Ifa is not just a ritual, but an activation of this ancestral memory as practitioners reconnect with the spiritual essence that flows through their veins. The divination process, where priests and priestesses use sacred objects to communicate with the unseen, is a reflection of the deeper belief that the blood carries messages from the past, messages that are still relevant to the present. When an individual seeks guidance from the Orisha, they are in essence seeking the counsel of those who have walked before them, tapping into an ancient, living archive contained within their own being. Similarly, the Dagara people of Burkina Faso believe that the ancestral spirits live not in the heavens, but within the blood of the living. For them, blood is the vessel that contains divine knowledge, a sacred technology passed down through the generations. In their rituals, blood is used to invoke the spirits, often through offerings and sacred practices designed to honor and awaken the ancestors. These rituals are not merely symbolic. They are active mechanisms of spiritual transfer wherein the living call upon the energy and wisdom of those who came before. Blood, in this view, is the source of all life, the foundation for spiritual continuity, and the means through which the past directly influences the present. In ancient Egypt, the people also understood the sanctity of blood and their spiritual practices. The Egyptian concept of Ma'at, which represents balance, truth, and cosmic order, was deeply rooted in the idea that the bloodline carried the essence of divine law. Priests would perform rituals in which they symbolically connected with the bloodline of the pharaohs and their ancestors, ensuring that the ruler's actions aligned with divine will. Blood was seen as a divine force that not only continued physical lineage, but also the spiritual legacy of a people. The heart, considered the seat of the soul, was believed to carry within it the divine knowledge and memory of past lives, thus tying an individual's spiritual essence to the blood that flowed through their veins. These rituals across African traditions share a common understanding. Ancestors live through lineage, not just through memory. Memory can fade, but blood is eternal. It does not forget. The spiritual inheritance of the ancestors is passed through the bloodline, and this inheritance carries power far beyond physical traits. The ancestors live on not just as distant memories, but as living forces that shape the destiny of the family and the community. They speak through the blood, offering guidance, protection, and wisdom. In this way, blood becomes a living archive of everything that has come before. This concept challenges the modern understanding of inheritance, which is largely focused on genetics and biology. In Western thought, inheritance is primarily concerned with the transmission of traits through genes, with little consideration for the spiritual or emotional legacies passed down from one generation to the next. But in African traditions, the idea of inheritance is much broader. It includes not only the genetic traits passed down through the bloodline, but also the wisdom, values, and teachings of those who came before. The lineage is not merely a family tree of physical traits, but a lineage of spirit, memory, and divine power. The spiritual inheritance passed down through the bloodline is just as, if not more significant than the genetic inheritance. This view of blood as spiritual technology stands in stark contrast to the modern, scientific understanding of genetics. While science focuses on the physical aspects of inheritance, African cosmologies recognize that the essence of the ancestors, their spirits, their energies, are transmitted through the bloodline. It is a concept that unites the material and immaterial, the biological and the spiritual, recognizing that the two are inseparable. As more people seek to reclaim their ancestral roots through ancestry tests, it's important to remember that the bloodline is not just a biological trace, it's a sacred channel that connects us to the living power of our ancestors. Through this connection, we do not simply inherit genes, we inherit the memory, the strength, and the spirit of those who came before. For centuries, African spiritual traditions have taught that the body does not merely inherit physical traits, but also carries the memories, traumas, and wisdom of ancestors. This knowledge was passed down through oral traditions, rituals, and ceremonies that emphasize the deep connection between the living and the dead. African cosmologies have always understood that blood is more than just a biological inheritance. It is a conduit for memory, for the power and the experiences of generations long past. And now in recent years, science is beginning to catch up with this ancient wisdom, as research into epigenetics reveals how trauma, memory, and even behavior can be passed down through our DNA. Epigenetics is the study of changes in gene expression that do not involve alterations to the underlying DNA sequence. What scientists have discovered is that experiences, particularly traumatic ones, can leave marks on our DNA. These marks, known as epigenetic tags, can influence how genes are expressed and can be passed down through generations. In simpler terms, the trauma experienced by our ancestors doesn't just fade away with time, it can be encoded in our genes, affecting the biology of their descendants. This is a scientific validation of what African spiritual traditions have long known. The body remembers. One of the most striking pieces of research that supports this idea comes from studies of Holocaust survivors and their descendants. Research has shown that the children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors have a higher likelihood of developing post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and other mental health conditions, even though they never directly experienced the trauma themselves. This is because the trauma of the Holocaust was encoded in the DNA of the survivors, and passed down to their descendants. The same phenomenon has been observed in the descendants of those who survived the brutalities of slavery. African Americans, for example, often experience higher levels of anxiety, depression, and trauma-related disorders, even though their own lived experiences may not directly align with those of their enslaved ancestors. The suffering and trauma of their forebears are embedded in their very genetic makeup, passed down like a shadow from one generation to the next. In African spiritual traditions, this idea of ancestral trauma is not a new concept. The notion that the body retains the memories of past generations has always been present. Rituals such as ancestor veneration, offerings, and healing practices were all based on the belief that the spirits of the ancestors could communicate with the living, and that their wisdom, as well as their pain, lived on in the bloodline. The Yoruba tradition, for instance, holds that the spirits of the ancestors reside within the living, guiding them and providing protection, but also influencing their emotional and physical well-being. The Dagara people of Burkina Faso also believe that ancestral spirits can affect the health and behavior of their descendants, and that ancestral knowledge can be accessed through spiritual practices designed to awaken the bloodline. This ancient understanding aligns with what modern science is now discovering. Just as African spiritual systems taught that the body remembers, scientists are finding that the cellular memory of trauma is real. This is especially evident when examining the effects of historical trauma, such as the violence of slavery, colonization, and forced migration. These events did not just impact the people who lived through them. They impacted their descendants as well through the genetic inheritance of trauma. The spirits of these ancestors may not always be visible, but their influence continues to ripple through the generations, embedded in the very cells that make up their descendants. The idea that spirit is encoded in cells may sound mystical to some, but the scientific discoveries around epigenetics provide a bridge between ancient African wisdom and modern biology. Research shows that trauma can alter the expression of certain genes, changing how individuals respond to stress and adversity. This understanding is only deepening our knowledge of how experiences, especially traumatic ones, can have lasting impact, not just on our mental health, but on our biology. These findings suggest that, just as African traditions have always taught, our bodies are not neutral vessels, but active participants in carrying the stories of our ancestors. Our bloodlines are not merely genetic paths leading back to our ancestors. They are spiritual highways carrying the imprint of past lives, past struggles, and past triumphs. The implications of this are profound. If trauma can be passed down genetically, then so can healing. Just as we inherit the wounds of our ancestors, we also inherit their resilience, their wisdom, and their strength. By understanding the epigenetic transmission of trauma, we can begin to unlock the ways in which healing can also be passed down through rituals, ceremonies, and spiritual practices that honor the ancestors and reclaim their power. As modern science decodes the mysteries of the body's memory, we are reminded that the wisdom of our ancestors was never lost. It was encoded in the very cells we carry today, waiting to be remembered, activated, and embraced. Rituals have long been the gateway to activating the power embedded within the bloodline. In African spiritual traditions, the act of honoring the ancestors is not a mere ceremonial gesture. It is a deep, transformative process that involves engaging with the spiritual energy stored in the blood. These rituals are designed to awaken the blood, to call upon the ancestors, and to allow their wisdom, strength, and guidance to flow through the living. Through rituals like libations, ancestor altars, and naming ceremonies, the connection to the bloodline is not just remembered, but reactivated. These practices are not only spiritual, they are metaphysical tools for accessing the divine power encoded in the very cells of one's body. Libations, one of the most sacred of African rituals, involve pouring water, wine, or palm wine onto the ground as an offering to the ancestors. The ritual of pouring libations is more than an act of respect. It is a symbolic act of nourishing the spirits of those who came before. The liquid poured is seen as a medium that connects the physical and spiritual worlds, serving as a conduit for communication and remembrance. The ancestors, it is believed, thrive on these offerings, and in return they offer protection, guidance, and blessings. The libations are not just for the ancestors, they are for the living as well, ensuring that the flow of ancestral wisdom continues, moving through the bloodline like a river that never runs dry. Ancestor altars are another integral part of these rituals, serving as physical spaces where offerings, prayers, and messages are exchanged. These altars are filled with sacred objects, stones, candles, incense, photographs, and sometimes even bones that represent the ancestors and their connection to the living. The altar is a space for remembrance, but also for spiritual action. By placing items of significance on the altar, practitioners invoke the power of the ancestors, asking for guidance, healing, and clarity. This practice is not only about connection, it is about activating the lineage, creating a sacred space where the spirits of the ancestors can intervene in the lives of the descendants. In many African cultures, naming ceremonies play an essential role in reinforcing the connection between the individual and the ancestral bloodline. The names given to children are not arbitrary. They are carefully chosen to reflect the spirit and identity of the ancestors. These names are often tied to particular virtues, historical events, or spiritual qualities that are meant to guide the individual throughout their life. In this way, a child's name is more than just a label. It is an embodiment of their place within the lineage, a reminder that they carry within them the blood, memory, and spirit of those who have gone before. The naming ceremony itself is a powerful ritual during which the community gathers to celebrate the new life and the lineage it represents. It is a rite of passage marking the child's arrival into the world and a return to a long history of ancestors. Beyond these specific rituals, there are broader practices that awaken the spiritual power within the blood. Initiation rites are a central part of many African traditions, particularly within secret societies or spiritual organizations. These rites are designed to teach the initiate about their ancestral connection and to empower them with the knowledge and strength of their bloodline. Initiations can involve physical and spiritual tests, including fasting, dancing, singing, and even symbolic or literal sacrifice. The purpose of sacrifice, whether it is an animal offering or a symbolic act, is to honor the ancestors and to show that the initiate is ready to receive the power that comes with their bloodline. In some cases, initiates undergo symbolic death and rebirth, signifying their transformation and a readiness to carry forward the legacy of their ancestors. These rituals, while sometimes misunderstood in the West as superstition or idol worship, are in fact deeply rooted in the belief that the bloodline is a living, breathing entity that must be nurtured and activated. Through these sacred practices, the living reconnect with their ancestral energy and invoke the strength and wisdom stored in their blood. In many ways, these rituals serve as a portal between the worlds of the living and the dead, allowing for an exchange of spiritual energy that transcends time. Perhaps one of the most profound aspects of these rituals is the ability to unlock memories and experiences that the living may never have been directly taught. It's not uncommon for people to recall languages, songs, or places that they've never been taught or even heard of. This phenomenon, where individuals are able to remember ancestral experiences, speaks to the depth of ancestral memory stored within the bloodline. These memories are not merely intellectual, they are experiential, felt deeply in the body and spirit. People have described knowing things they had never been taught, like understanding the meaning behind a specific song or being able to perform a ritual without ever having been instructed in it. This is the blood remembering, reconnecting with the deep, often hidden knowledge that flows through the veins. It is a testimony to the power of these rituals and the spiritual science of African lineage, where the body becomes a vessel for ancestral wisdom, activating the power within through the sacred act of remembrance, through libations, ancestor altars, naming ceremonies, and initiation rites. The bloodline is awakened, and the spirit is connected to the wisdom and power of the ancestors. These practices are a testament to the belief that memory is not just something stored in the mind, but something that is physically encoded in the blood, in the very cells of our bodies. The rituals are not just about honoring the past. They are about reconnecting with it, bringing its power into the present, and ensuring that the bloodline continues to thrive. Through these sacred acts, the ancestors live on, not just as memories, but as living forces within the blood, guiding, protecting, and empowering those who honor them. In today's world, ancestry DNA testing has emerged as a revolutionary tool for connecting individuals to their roots. What once felt like a distant, abstract idea of family history has been transformed into a tangible experience, offering a personalized map to one's past. Yet, as more people use this test to trace their genetic lineage, they are discovering that these results are more than just a collection of data points. They are opening the door to something much deeper, a spiritual reconnection to ancestors and to a part of their identity that had been forgotten or suppressed. While these tests can pinpoint geographical regions, ancestral tribes, and family lines, they are also, in a way, a modern gateway back to spirit, guiding people toward a rediscovery of their true selves. As Black people around the world increasingly turn to DNA testing to explore their African heritage, many are experiencing a profound awakening. For decades, colonization, slavery, and the forced erasure of African identity have left a chasm between many in the diaspora and their ancestral lands. Generations have grown up disconnected from the spiritual practices, languages, and customs of their forebears. But as individuals who receive the results, many are drawn back to these very roots, embarking on the personal journeys to reconnect with African lineages and reclaim the rituals that define their heritage. Stories of people rediscovering ancestral villages, reconnecting with long-lost relatives, and seeking out African spiritual traditions are becoming more common. In these moments of reconnection, the data on a screen becomes more than just information. It becomes a living, breathing testament to the power of ancestral knowledge carried forward through the bloodline. However, there's a deeper truth that these tests often fail to convey. They cannot capture the fullness of one's spiritual legacy. DNA results can tell us where our ancestors lived, which tribes they belong to, and even which specific genetic traits we share. But the tests cannot reveal the soul of those ancestors, their experiences, their spiritual practices, and the wisdom they passed down through generations. What the tests don't tell you is the deep story of how your lineage has shaped your life, how the memories of your ancestors are encoded in the very fabric of your being, and how their experiences of pain, resilience, and joy still live in you today. The journey to reconnect with one's heritage is not just about tracing family trees. It is about reconnecting with the spiritual essence that resides within the bloodline. It is about awakening the dormant energies that have been passed down through generations, waiting for the right moment to be activated. The rise of ancestry testing has given birth to what can be called the new sacred pilgrimage of return. For centuries, the Black diaspora has been displaced from the physical and spiritual lands of their ancestors. The scars of colonialism, slavery, and forced migration left an invisible divide between the descendants of Africa and the continent itself. But today, this pilgrimage is taking place not necessarily in physical journeys to Africa, but in spiritual reconnections that are being made through knowledge, rituals, and practices. Many individuals are returning to African traditions, learning the spiritual sciences of their ancestors, and even traveling back to the villages and lands from which they were taken. This pilgrimage is no longer solely about a geographical return. It is about a spiritual return to the wisdom, values, and practices that shaped their forebears. In some cases, this return manifests in the practice of African spirituality. Many people who have traced their African roots through DNA testing are finding themselves drawn to spiritual systems like Ifa, Vodun, and ancestral veneration. These systems offer a direct connection to the ancestral power that flows through the bloodline. In reclaiming these practices, people are not only reconnecting with the ancient knowledge of their forebears, but also finding healing and empowerment. For many, this journey is a form of spiritual reclamation, an attempt to undo the centuries of disconnection, pain, and loss caused by colonization and slavery. The modern use of ancestry DNA is allowing a new generation to reclaim their spiritual heritage and to realize that their identity is not just shaped by the present or the past, but by an ancestral lineage that stretches back millennia. This process is more than academic or genealogical. It is deeply spiritual. It is about discovering the deep roots of one's identity, roots that were once buried under the weight of history, but are now rising again, reclaiming their place in the present. These tests are creating a spiritual renaissance, a movement in which people from the African diaspora are reconnecting with not just their genetic past, but their spiritual birthright. The results of these tests are sparking a new conversation about what it means to be African, what it means to belong, and what it means to carry the spirits of ancestors within. The sacred pilgrimage of return is no longer just a physical journey. It is an inward journey of remembrance, healing, and reclamation. This journey is about returning to the spirit of the ancestors, rediscovering the rituals, stories, and practices that were once lost, and forging a new path forward, one that honors both the past and the present. As more people reconnect with their African heritage, it becomes clear that these ancestral bonds are not merely a matter of genetics. They are a living, breathing connection to the past and a powerful force that can shape the future. The journey of spiritual return is just beginning, and with it comes a profound understanding of who we are and where we come from, through ancestry tests and spiritual reconnection. The journey back to our roots is transforming the way we see ourselves and the world around us. The blood remembers, and now, so do we. Your blood is a sacred archive, a living testament to everything your ancestors lived, fought for, and passed down. It carries within it the wisdom of those who came before you, the strength they cultivated, and the love they nurtured. It holds the memories of triumph and trauma, of joy and struggle, and most importantly, it carries their spirit. In the very cells of your body, your ancestors continue to speak, continue to guide, and continue to empower you, even though they may no longer walk among us. You are the future of your ancestors, the embodiment of the hopes and their legacies. You stand on the shoulders of generations, and every breath you take, every step you make is a continuation of their journey. As we reconnect with our bloodlines through DNA tests, rituals, and ancestral practices, we are reminded that we are not merely individuals living in isolation. We are the product of centuries of lived experiences, the descendants of those who carved out a place for us in this world. The journey to reclaim our spiritual and ancestral heritage is not just a return to the past, it is an awakening to the power we have within us. We carry in our blood the potential to heal, to grow, and to build upon the foundation our ancestors created. This is why the blood remembers. It remembers who we are, and it remembers what we can become. So, as we continue this journey of reconnecting with our roots, let us honor the bloodline that runs through us. Let us embrace the wisdom, the strength, and the power of those who came before us. The blood remembers, and in doing so, it invites us to remember too. By subscribing to this journey, by commenting "The Blood Remembers," we open ourselves up to the continuous flow of ancestral wisdom, ready to heal and empower us. In our next video, we'll explore another key aspect of African spiritual traditions, the spiritual power of African names, and how names are more than just labels. They are keys to unlocking our spiritual destiny. Thank you for watching, for remembering, and for being part of this powerful journey. The blood remembers, and so do we.